These were years of mounting tension, of passions unleashed and tempers no longer restrained. America, once united by compromise, was now drifting towards the abyss of civil war. The image here of violence in Congress itself symbolizes the fever of the time. What had once been argued in speeches and pamphlets would now be fought with fists, with canes, and soon with muskets. In 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe published Uncle Tom's Cabin. Few works of fiction have so altered the course of events. The book gave faces, voices, and a searing moral urgency to the plight of the enslaved. It stirred the conscience of the North and made many who had been indifferent into passionate opponents of slavery. In Europe, too, the book found eager audiences, shaping foreign perceptions of the American struggle. Stowe's story was proof of the written word's power to inflame, inspire, and unsettle. The Kansas Nebraska Act of 1854 reopened wounds many thought long closed. Popular sovereignty was to decide slavery in these new territories. Yet at once, both sides poured in. Abolitionist settlers sent by organizations like the New England Emigrant Aid Company and armed Missourians determined to carry slavery westward. Rival governments arose. Free Soil in Topeka, pro slavery in Lecompton. In Kansas, the principle of popular sovereignty became not a solution, but a recipe for bloodshed. The struggle turned violent. In 1856, the pro slavery sacking of Lawrence brought destruction to the Free Soil stronghold. Days later, John Brown and his followers struck back at Pottawatomie Creek, hacking pro slavery men to death in the dark of night. By year's end, Kansas was at war with itself. The prairie became a proving ground, a place where Americans tested their resolve with bullets and fire. The phrase bleeding Kansas was no exaggeration, it was prophecy. And then the violence spilled into the very halls of government. Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts, fiery in his denunciation of slavery, exorciated South Carolina's Andrew Butler in a blistering speech. Days later, Butler's kinsman, Congressman Preston Brooks, strode into the Senate chamber and beat Sumner senseless with a cane. Here was the Union in miniature. Words answered with blows, debate answered with violence. In the North, Brooks was reviled. In the South, he was celebrated. The divide grew deeper still. In 1856, a new political force appeared, the Republican Party, fielding John C. Fremont as its candidate. They opposed slavery spread. The Democrats, desperate for a safe choice, nominated James Buchanan, who had remained conveniently uninvolved in Kansas. The fading Whigs collapsed into fragments, while the Know Nothings, driven by nativism, nominated Millard Fillmore. Buchanan triumphed, but the map revealed a dangerous truth. Republicans had carried much of the North. Sectionalism now defined political allegiance. Once in office, Buchanan faced Kansas again. The pro slavery territorial legislature drafted the Lecompton Constitution, a document crafted to ensure slavery's survival. Free Soilers boycotted the vote, and Buchanan, to the dismay of many, endorsed it. Congress, however, rejected the measure after a bitter fight that even descended into physical brawls among its members. What Kansas revealed was not just local strife, but national paralysis. Each side unwilling to yield, each side certain of its righteousness. Then came the Supreme Court's fateful decision. Dred Scott, a slave who had lived on free soil, sued for his freedom. Chief Justice Roger Taney delivered the court's ruling. Scott had no standing, for he was not and could never be a citizen. Moreover, Congress itself, Taney declared, had no authority to ban slavery in the territories. The Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. Far from settling the question, the decision sent shockwaves through the North. To many, it proved the court was now a tool of the slave power. In Illinois, two men carried this national crisis into sharp relief. Abraham Lincoln, rising Republican, challenged Stephen Douglas for the Senate. Across 7 debates, they sparred over slavery, popular sovereignty, and the meaning of freedom itself. Lincoln pressed Douglas on how his doctrine squared with Dred Scott. Douglas offered the Freeport Doctrine that slavery required laws to survive and territories could refuse to pass them. He kept his Senate seat, but at a cost. The South turned on Douglas, while Lincoln gained a national audience. By 1859, John Brown reappeared with a plan both desperate and visionary. At Harper's Ferry, he seized a federal arsenal, hoping to spark a general slave uprising. The raid failed. Brown was captured, tried, and hanged. Yet his death reverberated across the land. To Southerners, he was proof of Northern fanaticism. To abolitionists, he became a martyr, a prophet who had given his life for freedom. Harper's Ferry brought the fear of insurrection to the South's doorstep and made disunion seem inevitable. By 1860, the Democratic Party, once the nation's strongest, had fractured. Northern Democrats rallied behind Douglas, still clinging to popular sovereignty. Southern Democrats, led by John C. Breckinridge, demanded federal protection for slavery everywhere and even dreamed of annexing Cuba. The party of Jackson and Polk was no more. Its house divided. It could not stand. Meanwhile, Republicans under Lincoln assembled a broad coalition. To free soilers, they promised no extension of slavery. To manufacturers, protective tariffs. To Western farmers, free homesteads. To the Northwest, a transcontinental railroad. It was a platform as pragmatic as it was political, designed to unite very Northern interests. Yet Southerners, convinced Lincoln, sought abolition, vowed to leave the Union if he won. Their threats, once bluster, now carried the weight of resolve. The election revealed a nation broken in four. Lincoln carried the North in the presidency, but with less than 40% of the popular vote. Breckinridge swept much of the South. John Bell, the Constitutional Union Party, sought compromise but gained little. Douglas, architect of popular sovereignty, won only Missouri. In 10 southern states, Lincoln's name never even appeared on the ballot. To Southerners, his victory was proof that the Union was no longer theirs. The response was swift. In December 1860, South Carolina seceded, followed by 6 more states before Lincoln even took the oath of office. They issued declarations citing the failure of the Fugitive Slave Act's enforcements, the rise of abolitionism, and Lincoln's election as causes. A new government was born, the Confederate States of America, with Jefferson Davis as president, and James Buchanan in his last months did nothing. While leaving secession illegal but lacking the will to act, he watched as the Union unraveled. Desperation still lingered. In early 1861, Senator John Crittenden offered one final plan: slavery guaranteed in the South, prohibited in the North, extended along the old Missouri line. Southerners were prepared to accept, but Republicans and Lincoln himself refused. To extend slavery any further, they believed, was to surrender the very principles upon which the Union rested. The compromise failed. The last chance to avert war slipped away. Here ends the video.